Radio Shack has the perfect gift. The TRS-80 computer, the most significant investment a parent can make.
I think when I was starting out, because it was only me in the house that understood computers, my parents did not. They just left me to it.
So my mom bought me a VIC-20, and I had a black and white TV, VIC-20 with the tape drive. And I just was in love.
So for Christmas when I was 4 years old, my mom got us a Commodore VIC-20. And she was on the phone calling my uncle to find out how to hook the thing up. And when she came back to the living room, she had seen that my brother and I had already hooked it up. We'd already gotten that far, and we were sitting there staring at the screen that just said ready, and the cursor was blinking.
About ninth grade, my father purchased a PC, and so he had it in my playroom. And so we had this room that was the playroom/office. And so I always laugh and joke with people and say I had a Barbie doll in one hand and a computer manual in the other hand.
My parents didn't even know I would be up till like 2 o'clock in the morning when I was like 10, writing programs.
I remember my first experience with code when my parents had purchased for me an Apple II Plus.
When I was a kid, I was 7 years old, living in Florida. So at the time we had a TI-99 4A computer and no games.
You know, we were playing games, and then you start to realize how you can mess with the games.
When I was 8, actually, my parents got me a Commodore 64. They had read that computers were the next big thing.
The school got a computer. It was a TRS-80 Model 1, and I think this was probably in 1980. Anyway, they pulled us out of class to show us this thing, and the lady showed me how to make a program.
My mom had gotten me an Odyssey from one of those things, and it had a keyboard, a membrane keyboard on it, you know. And there was a cartridge that you could plug into this thing to write little programs for it. And so that was probably the first computer sort of thing that I got.
It was a VIC-20. And it was at my grandmother's house. I grew up on a dairy farm, so I was often at my grandmother's house. It was kind of like family compound thing. Sure. And I discovered this device under the television and, you know, started playing text-based adventures.
When I started to learn how to code, it was in the 70s, and I was playing arcade games and loved it. And then my friends, one of my friends told me that I could go play games and not pay any money, which when you're 11 years old, money is, you know, did not have that much money. So I followed him up to the local college in town. I saw what the few students were doing in there, which was typing in code. I started asking the students what they were doing and started writing down the names of the different commands, which was HP Basic, that was connected to a timeshare mainframe in the next room.
Grade 6, I was like, I want a Commodore 64. So if I get on the honor roll, can I have one? And sure enough, they agreed to that. And at the end of the year, I handed my report card, and we went out and bought a Commodore 64.
Wow. Yeah, the first time I wrote or played with code was a very long time ago. I was about maybe 5 or 6, and my dad had brought home a TRS-80 color computer. Back then, you know, you had tape decks, and you know, we didn't have a hard drive. We didn't have anything.
I remember the first program that I wrote, again, 8 years old. I got 1,000 lines done, and I went to hit save, and I couldn't. Because with the PC Junior, you had to have a basic cartridge and a floppy disk in at the same time. And I was like, oh, well, I'll just plug in the basic cartridge now. As soon as you did that, the whole computer rebooted.
It actually all started, my mother purchased a Commodore 64 for me, and I started tinkering with it. And games at that time were a little bit more expensive than I could afford as a teenager. So I actually started creating my own games. Oh, so nice. That's how I actually got into code. So I started actually writing assembly.
Computers weren't very common in everybody's house. I think we were just lucky because, again, my dad was a doctor and he needed to write up reports. So there was like a utility for this. Like there was a reason to have this computer in the house. But I think you probably didn't know this, but he just spurred my interest, and now like this is what I want to do for the rest of my life.
It was after I was a cab driver. I was an adult. Well, that's not true. In high school, I did some coding on a Monrobot, which was a desk computer, not a desktop. It was a desk computer, and we did machine language, and I didn't like it. The first time that I did any professional programming, I was working for Citibank, and I had gone in as a word processor and said, "You have a lot of computers here, and I would like to do that." And they said, "Well, you need 5 years experience or a master's." And I said, "Perfect, because I don't have either of those."
I mean, I was so desperate to not work on the family farm because, like, when you live with your folks, that's kind of the expectation, and it's reasonable.
The first time I saw a computer, I actually have to think really hard because it was such a long time ago. It must have been the computers they built at college, the math professors built, Heathkits. I mean, that's my first hands-on experience, maybe 1982 or so.
I remember the Beagle brothers had a bunch of software written in AppleSoft Basic. And so you would list this AppleSoft Basic code. It was like line 10, print hello, line 20, go to 10, right? That kind of a thing. And you would learn how to program by reading other people's programs.
So I started programming on an Atari Basic. It was an Atari Basic 800, I believe. And so my grandma noticed that I was more interested in trying to figure out how to code on it than play video games on it. So she ended up giving it to me so that I could learn how to program, since nobody could afford computers back then. I mean, it was unheard of.
The first time that I knew you could really do something with computers, I think, was when I was at a school event with an Apple II, and they were teaching us a programming language called Logo with a little triangular turtle. And you would write stuff like, forward 5, turn, right 90, and things like that. But they had hooked up this long ribbon cable. So they had a physical turtle. And we had this 20-foot long ribbon cable, and they'd taken that turtle and put a Sharpie at the top of it and put out butcher paper. And they laid it out on the floor, and we would go and draw these spirographs and we'd be holding the ribbon cable to make sure that the turtle didn't get tied up in it and stuff. And it was the physicality of that. It was the kinesthetic intensity of, I typed something on the computer and the world changed.
Radio Shack's Color Computer 3 comes with everything you see here. Other items each sold separately, only at Radio Shack.